How's everyone night's going? Hopefully well. You ready again? We got another landfall. We got to track again tonight. Another landfall. We got to come. We get back to pull up the radar too. See here, boom. This is around probably the center of our storm, somewhere in there, somewhere close to there. All right, looks like some people still coming in, getting settled into the stream, but we'll get into it. Let's get into it. So we talked about last night how quickly the important factors we were looking for this. I'm gonna say probably second landfall, even though it's by semantics it's third because it crossed over, the barrier island, and then it crossed over um, actual landfall. So there's technically been two landfalls already. So we'll have one more landfall in South Carolina likely. But we have to, some of the things that I said we have to look for are, last night was when it was around here ish. How quickly does it get off into the ocean? Because the minute it gets into the ocean, that's when we can just from a meteorological perspective, not considering the rest of the environment, we can start intensification, right? Because obviously we said like 9 out of 10, so like it's probably more than that. Like 95% can't really intensify over land, um, like the brown ocean effect. So how quickly does this get over into the ocean? And it went pretty fast. That happened pretty fast, and so it got out in the ocean, and then for about took about 4 or 5 hours, I think, and then we saw the upgrade to hurricane again. It's possible it was just already a hurricane because those winds are gusting on, winds were gusting on the Daytona Beach, this morning, strong enough to rip off, to rip the roofs off buildings. So the winds were gusting really strong. They had this onshore flow from the backside of Ian that was just pushing storm surge onto land like this, and we saw maybe anywhere from maybe 4 to maybe 7 feet of storm surge possibly along these areas along the Florida coast. They were getting hit pretty hard with that onshore wind, probably gusting. Many of these places were gusting anywhere from 50 to probably gusting 50 to anywhere to 90 miles an hour. I would say I didn't have to drive, but any of these, and maybe not that high up. But all these spots down here were probably gusting anywhere from 50 to 90 miles per hour, and that's why we saw such significant storm surge. Some people were comparing it to Matthew, which was another life-threatening storm surge situation. They consider by the National Hurricane Center is around 6 feet of life-threatening storm surge because that's about the height of a person. So that's the height of a slightly above average male. So 6 feet is what they consider about that life-threatening storm surge, that human height. It's what they consider that life-threatening storm surge threshold. And it was present here. It's also going to be very present. Going to be very, very present probably into here as well on this far southern North Carolina coast and eastern South Carolina coast too. There's going to be more threat for life-threatening storm surge. So we got back into the ocean, and then now we're seeing this. This is pretty baroclinic, this process. And what I mean by that, we're seeing this process of a slight hybrid extratropical transition, but maintaining a lot of those warm core surface tropical features. So yes, it's imagine a little bit of a nor'easter combo with a tropical system. Imagine a little bit. It's going to be a little bit like that. We call them mid-latitude cyclones or extratropical cyclones because they get their fuel from the upper levels of the atmosphere, quite literally. So that's why we call the surface, the ones that start from the surface and that get their fuel from the warm ocean waters, we call those tropical cyclones. Which I know I just like try to make you feel dumb or something, but I'm just trying to keep it basic, and clear and concise. Um, because as some people want to understand this, and I want to help you understand what I'm looking at in terms of, and help you understand how I'm I'm not like an official forecaster, even though I do make a lot of forecasts, but it's a lot of analysis that's used to make uh, a little bit of a forecast. That's kind of what we do here. That's what all most meteorologists do. Most. But so all this rainfall is getting pushed to the northwest side, because when that happens, there's typically dry air is getting up and trained into the system. So that's why we see a lot of the convection on the south. Notice how there's no rainfall on the south, maybe some few rain showers here, but notice how all the way on the south side and all the way up into the east side of the system, there's no rainfall. Well, that's because this dry air is getting wrapped around, right? All this dry air we talked about, that was honestly halted intensification at the last second. Otherwise, we probably would have seen a Cat 5 at landfall. All this dry air is getting wrapped into the system now that it's becoming more interactive with that trough. So even though dry air is getting, and you typically hear me say, well, when we see dry air get into the systems, that typically means these things like to weaken. But when we start to see some of those hybrid characteristics of a cold core system, of an extratropical system, when we see a storm take on some of those characteristics, that's when we start to look for, uh, you know, other factors that may impact a tropical cyclone more. Now that's taking on some of those non-tropical features. The dry air is not going to impact the intensification possibly as much, and wind shear is not going to affect it as much, especially because with the angle of the trough, which we talked about yesterday, it's being a little bit more sheared off now, so it's not quite as favorable. But it's not like it's going this way and E's moving this way. The flow of the trough is still moving off this way, and Ian is going to do something like this. So it's not like it's not being sheared off to the point where the low level center and whatever mid level center we have, they're most likely tilted for sure, but it's not being sheared off completely off the top, and it's a little bit harder to shear the system off when it's getting some fuel from the baroclinic process. But it's able. What's unique about this system is it's going to take in some of those baroclinic, those extratropical processes, but it's also going to use the fuel of these warm ocean surface temperatures, these warm sea surface temperatures in here, which I'll show you. So we go right off. Notice how we had these 28, 29 degree sea surface temperatures all the way up, where Ian's been traveling as soon as it got off the coast. So this is what's allowing. It's going to take in these warm Gulf waters. And remember, deep ocean heat content. We continue to go over the importance of deep ocean heat content. It's the fuel below the surface, the warmth. It combines not only the warmth at the surface, but the warmth in terms of the depth below the surface. And notice how we have all these, green and yellows. We're here in the Gulf Stream. These are some, this means that 26 degree isotherm that we look for, that threshold to be considered a hurricane. It doesn't always have to be 26 degrees Celsius. But that threshold we look for means that 26-degree isotherm is extending well down below this, and even more, in this jet fuel we have out here, just ridiculously high values, which is typical to see with the Caribbean, and especially in a La Nina season. But notice it's using this fuel that's going to be able to allow it to fire convection from the surface, and that's why we still have a lot of those tropical characteristics with this system. So that's why it's going to be considered a hurricane. But a lot of the convection is going to get pushed off to the north and northwest, and even it's going to get pushed off. What's good, my man John? It's going to get pushed off up to the north and into the northwest. But notice in the flow of the jet stream, though, will be this way. So once it hits this point, then it will just start getting spread out, and that's why we're going to see heavy rainfall totals. Really, I know I'm making a big mess, but that's why we're going to see heavy rainfall totals because of the flow. Here, we're going to see all heavy rainfall totals all into this region here. Already have, obviously, in all these parts. Already had in Florida. And we're going to talk about a little bit later too. We went over it last stream, but probably going to be some sort of flooding threat, for the Mid-Atlantic as well, that we're going to have to go over, because this is going to turn, right? We're talking about this turning into an extratropical system, so eventually it's going to make that full transition to a mid-latitude cyclone. Same thing as extratropical cyclone. It's going to make that full transition to a cold core system. So then it's going to get its fuel from the upper levels, and we're going to get an upper level low to form. But that upper level low is going to stall out kind of, and it's going to sit over the U.S. until it dies out and really just gets picked off by another trough. So it's potential we could see some prolonged, significant flooding totals in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm not talking like something historic like we saw with Florida, but we maybe some places could be getting a half foot of rain, maybe. So we'll look into the finer details of that. We'll see what the Weather Prediction Center has put out too, but there could be some significant flooding across the Mid-Atlantic with that tropical moisture embedded into that upper level low, and it's even going to pull in some new moisture that's not associated with just Ian. It's going to pull in some Gulf moisture as well, which we all know that's more tropical moisture. So it's not like it's double the tropical moisture. It's just more to fuel the system. So we're going to have to watch an inland flooding threat as well, early next week. Oh, that's good news. I'm sure you probably got lucky with where it made landfall. I'm sure you probably a lot of erosion though probably happened around the beach, close to your house, because of the offshore winds blowing the storm surge to get negative storm surge values. Because we saw the devastating storm surge get pulled in this way, but then up here towards Tampa, all the storm surge got pulled out. Well, it was negative storm surge. So the storm surge kind of happened, but just in a negative way, which is a good way. But when I say negative, it's negative storm surge because it's negative values, and the water get pulled out this way because that's the flow of a tropical cyclone. So significant beach erosion. That you will feel the impacts of that, though, I'm sure. People that were north of where the center made landfall. Yep. But this is very interesting now too. Oh boy. So it looks like some convection is starting to pop. And right, look at this. This is a bit more frontal. This is a little bit less hurricane-like. So this is why we're seeing it. This is slightly of a cold core. This is kind of the end of a front forming. It's still kind of feeder band-like into a tropical system. but it's a little bit also like a front of just a regular cyclone you see moving through, during the late fall or something. So this is convection firing up too, which lets us know, right? We have these warm Gulf waters and the strong piece of energy here. Obviously, it's a hurricane, so it's got strong low-level vorticity, and even now more strong mid-level vorticity at this point as well. And that's helping aid in firing up convection way out ahead here. And then this is associated with the trough. Notice what we talked about. This gets pulled north to the point where then it starts to get pulled east northeast, and that's why we're going to be looking at that flood threat, for all these people here. I guess it's going to be a bit harder for them at this point, but given the track. But notice this convection firing. I got. Well, actually, I was supposed to text a friend. I'll do that after the stream. I was supposed to text a friend that was asking me a question about his weekend plans too, but let me see. I guess it doesn't take long to briefly check. When is this? I guess it could be. Was it Ravens? Who's playing? I'm not sure the Ravens. I forget the Ravens are playing, but could be a wet one. Luckily, Ravens Bills. Luckily, Lamar's not a real quarterback, so we won't have to worry about. I'm just kidding. No, Lamar's nasty. I'm just messing. But yeah, that should be just a good game in general. But it could be. Yeah, I guess it could be a wet one. I mean, what we got here? No, not go. I'm a Pats fan, so we don't like that. Yeah, this could be at least Saturday too. Yeah, actually, you could make out. We'll see. It depends on. Will really depend on the banding. But bring it back here now to the a little bit closer. We can see you can see the center pretty defined. You can see the low level vort, the low level spin, the tight low level spin here. Even on satellite, there's no convection surrounding the whole thing like an eye wall. This is not that kind of system. I'm sorry, but we do have 6 Super Bowls, and I enjoy them a lot. So big Pats fan for me. But notice this convection that's popping around the system, and again, we're going to look for that. Almost look for a northwest eye wall is kind of what we're going to be looking for. It's not going to be quite like an eye wall, given again this is a little bit of a cold core, warm core combo system. But look for a lot of convection, probably anywhere from the northeast all the way down here, eventually to the western side, and that's we're kind of going to look for. Imagine like an east to western eye wall. This is what we're kind of gonna look like, even though it's not gonna be technically probably an eye wall. It'll just be an inner core. So this is interesting. So we had that initial pop earlier. You can see the end here. That was that initial pop. This convection here. This is what helped it get down to a 984. It helped the National Hurricane Center intensify at 10 more miles an hour. And now this is probably allowing more intensification too. So I wouldn't be shocked if we wake up tomorrow and it's sub 980. Could be sub 980 by the time we wake up tomorrow. Maybe by that 8 or 11 a.m. advisory, we could see this thing sub 980. Or maybe even sooner if it takes off. Like, there's a legit possibility that it, with the trough influencing and helping um, in helping the storm in some ways, to keep intensifying, uh, while not being a fully tropical system. But also those tropical characteristics. It's tropical at the surface. It's tropical enough at the surface, mainly warm core. So it's gonna take in those deep, those strong deep ocean heat content values with those 28, 29 degrees sea surface temperatures. That's going to help fuel the system from the surface well, and that's going to allow convection of fire still around the inner core of that low level spin of that where that tropical spin of Ian is, where the eye is of Ian. And with that combo, we've seen it before. We've seen it before, with storms take off. So we're not going to be looking for minus 90 degrees, minus 90 degree not sea surface temperatures, minus 90 degree cloud tops. We're not going to be looking for that with this one, but there is the potential that this thing could get to Cat 2. We talked about it last night. I said it wasn't the most likely scenario, but some things needed to happen. But everything that needed to happen for this thing to try to get to Cat 2, it's done a lot of those things pretty successfully, which is not a good sign for South Carolina. And that's why I'm kind of leaning on big up 4 to 7 feet, storm surge, I think all the way to the border. I would extend that even further. In my opinion, I would extend that all the way up until the coastline starts to change, until the angle of the coastline starts to change. That's just my opinion. Again, they know the geography in the area better. I don't know the geography in and out of the South Carolina coast and the North Carolina coast. I just know the angle of the coastlines, and that I can take that into consideration. And the depth, how shallow the water is near the coast. That's really all I can put into trying to give you helpful information on a storm surge impacts. But they have storm surge people that work and just have they know it in and out a little bit better than I do. Obviously from the National Hurricane Center. But if this thing does get to Cat 2 and this gets down to like 970 millibars in a Cat 2, this thing has a really strong low level spin. And remember, this is the DNA of a beast. It's the DNA of a system that was a borderline Cat 4, maybe gets upgraded to Cat 4 in the postseason analysis for that landfall on Cuba. Didn't eyewall replacement cycle in 6-7 hours like a badass. It did one of the quicker eyewall replacement cycles you ever see. Did that like a badass. Didn't allow dry air to encompass it after that, really. It did allow some dry air, still strengthened, even despite some dry air working in. The trough, angle the trough set up perfectly. Not perfect, but near good enough so that this could help enhance the outflow, which helped it intensify right up before landfall. Right, so it made that Cat 4 landfall, near Cat 4, 125 mile per hour landfall, went over Cuba, barely was affected, intensified within hours, within a few hours getting off of Cuba, did an eyewall replacement cycle within 6 hours, had shear that it had to worry about. The angle of the trough, though, was supportive enough for this thing to help enhance the outflow, like we just mentioned, of this hurricane. And that allowed this thing to intensify and take off right before landfall at 150 mile per hour Category 4 at landfall. Then, instead of like some models trying to stall it, then worked its way about on the quicker side of things off Florida so it could get back into the ocean and then became a hurricane within a few hours getting off the ocean. That's the past history. That's a lot of things that could have gone wrong, and everything that tried to go wrong has not gone wrong. So this is a system, you can't really like rely on the past when making future forecasts. But this thing's DNA, the storm's DNA is there's a lot of evidence pointing to that says why not be a Category 2 hurricane at landfall? Why can't it? It's done all this. It's had everything possible that tried to go wrong that didn't go wrong. So that's a little bit of a less scientific. Yeah, I described a lot of scientific meteorological things, but there's a lot of that wasn't the most science thing I've said before. That's not really scientific analysis, meteorological analysis. That's not weather analysis. But that's just sometimes there's gut feel with these things that you have to take into account too. And with all that being said, it makes me think that possibly we could see some. I went through that whole spiel to try to say, I think there could be, maybe not here, because I think even here, I remember we talked about it. They had it trying to make landfall somewhere in here. I think they put the center track here, but I would try to tell you, this thing, it looks like it's trying to get off fast, off and back into the ocean quicker, and that leads me to somewhere in here with the landfall, which is where I think we about see a landfall. And you still couldn't rule out maybe like up here. That would take a crazy track, but eastern South Carolina is where we're going to look for a landfall probably. Anywhere from central to eastern South Carolina. And we could see potentially more than 7 feet of storm surge. It wouldn't shock me. Again, I'm not an expert on the geography of this coastline, but it wouldn't shock me just based on from some of the more based on some of the more metrics of the storm itself. And I think that if this thing does get to like a Cat 2 100-mile-per-hour hurricane with low 970s pressure, that could be a real problem. And then we're back to looking at another devastating situation. There's tiers to this. So maybe, imagine that this Ian was like a tier, like 9 out of 10 in terms of how bad, you can see hurricane damage. But, this, take it only a couple, this could just be a couple tiers below that, maybe a tier or two below, some of that Ian stuff. If we see the intensification overnight and into tomorrow morning, we see continued intensification, that will be a problem. So what we're going to hope for is that even though it probably won't be too impactful, we can hope that dry air can limit some of the convection that pops at the surface, hopefully enough. And we hope that the way the angle of the trough isn't good enough to support a little bit better outflow in terms of the tropical side, but also not to support just injecting fuel into the cold core side of the system to help aid intensification. So that's kind of what we want to hope for in terms of holding intensification at bay here. And we'll do a live tweet as well. I want to point this out. Get a little live tweet. This because this new convection popping is enough to warrant a live tweet. Alrighty. Bro, the amount of I'm glad some of my tweets are getting out to more people, but with that, let me warn you. That comes a lot of different opinions, and we have had to mute a lot of conversations of tweets over the past 20 30 hours or so. A lot of notifications we've had to mute. a lot of different people like to voice their opinions, and sometimes they're dumb opinions. So it's kind of annoying after a while. Yeah, like it's. I know that sounded a little bit egocentric right there, but I listen. The mobile home stuff, like, bro, you just see a bunch of mobile homes, like people's actual houses, like tossed aside into a pile, and your first thought is, oh, that's only mobile homes. What did you expect? Well, the mobile homes didn't just move themselves. Something moved the mobile homes to take it. And also, I could show you thousands of other images to show you of the catastrophic damage. Like, some people just have no empathy, no empathy. Like, people's homes just tossed aside, regardless if it's mobile home or house. That's still their home. That's where they live. It's what they earned. Thank you. Thank you. It's still someone's home. Someone lives there. And they work to earn that. Maybe it's not the nicest home ever in history, but they work to earn that. It's hard to be a homeowner. And people are going like, how desensitized are you to this? Like, that's how you know those the people commenting that too, they have never seen, excuse my language, but they've never seen shit in their lives. They haven't seen damage like that firsthand, because otherwise they would feel a lot differently. Now, granted, I haven't, so I'm still a little bit desensitized too. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of photos of a lot of storm damage, and I've seen a lot of videos, firsthand accounts of that, and it's jarring, and you can see how it affects people. And I've had people message me about stuff, about how they've affected friends and etc. People through Twitter. So I have a better idea than like these people do, and it's so frustrating that these people just have no empathy, no empathy. Like, how, like, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. People's homes tossed up in a pile by double-digit storm surge, 10 plus feet of storm surge. People's homes tossed up in a pile. And the best you can come up are those are mobile homes. What did you expect? Well, I don't know. What if that was your house? How would you feel? Like, have some sort of empathy. That just so much stuff frustrates me that I don't even talk about on Twitter. I keep quiet so many of my thoughts, just for the sake of my followers, so they don't have to hear my opinions. And I try to keep it as weather stuff as I can. All right, let's get the live tweet here. Honestly, we probably have to just make a new GIF at this point. I just took 10 minutes talking about that. You're gonna have to make a new one. Yeah, I'd say empathy not only comes with maturity, but I would say experience. I'd say people can mature fast at a young age with a lot of stuff thrown on their plate, or in other words, experience. I'd say that, and sometimes the amount of experience that you get sometimes differs with age. So sometimes it just takes a lot more years in your life to have maturity and experience, and sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't. So people. That's why people have different experience at different times of their lives, and they see the world through different perspectives when they get older through experiences. I think that's the new one. Oh Lord, I have no idea which one it is now. Oh, Okay, it's the second one. Actually, maybe let's do it. Actually, I just want to see in case hurricane numbers went by. I don't want to make a false statement um, because evidence says otherwise. But as long as I don't have evidence to back against me, then I can, or I could possibly have evidence in favor. 984. Why did they keep saying it's pushing northwest? Is this actually like pushing west or something? I don't know why they keep saying that. 984 in our last pass, but that was even this didn't encounter that. That was what that was still 30 minutes ago. So possibly not even encountering for that for this new convection. This new that was that convective burst happened, dropped a couple millibars, and probably with this next convective burst, I bet we'll see another pressure fall. Yeah, I mean, Recon's like saying that, but I mean, you look at the center. I mean, I can even draw on the tweet here. That looks around where the center is, and that just does not look like it's heading west to me. I mean, if it headed due north from here, and it's supposed to go north northeast, if it just headed due north from here, and even that's like north northwest almost. It's gonna hit central South Carolina. So I'm not sure about this western, like stuff that recon's traveling. It's possible that it's more of a broad center now, so that recon's finding different spots of where the lowest area of pressure is. It's possible. Yeah, that's probably what I'd be doing too right now. So I'm enjoying my time with y'all right now. This CB burst is a bit different, but it's still a convective burst. That's what it is. It's just not, it's a little bit less typical than what we see. Uh, like rapidly intensifying Caribbean hurricane like Ian once was. A little bit different, or Gulf hurricane, whatever. Deep tropics, a little bit different. send. We'll see if anybody's talking about this. Yeesh. Man, you get off Twitter for a second. Miss 130 tweets. We gotta. I'm sorry. Love you, Chris Evans, but we gotta get this crap out of my timeline. Anybody talking about this? I think she even replied to some of my stuff. She's a really good tropical follow, actually. I'm trying to see what she said. She does a lot of good analysis. All right. It's okay. Get back here to. Honestly, I want to look at radar in a second too. See how it's translating. Well, we're getting more convection to pop over the center, or at least closer to the center now. Notice even getting a little bit more of these. I wouldn't say feeder bands, but a little bit of these more bands popping up on the south side. Just shows how strong the low level vorticity is with Ian. It's got that old, borderline Cat 5 DNA. Maybe you can make a case for Cat 5. You can make a case for Cat 5 for a lot of the past strong Cat 4s in like the past few years or so. You can make a case for really a lot of those storms, almost any of them. But making a case and definitively seeing a Cat 5 is one thing. So, yeah. But I want to play this radar loop. What do we got here? Notice a little bit even more some of these bands firing up into here. It is. That wasn't a good drawing. Notice some of these bands firing up into here as well. But you can see the convection that's getting going right here, right where that convective burst is. Really helping to spin. We're seeing a little that you can see that when you can see the convection turn and spin strong like that. That's when you can it's pretty definitive. With that strong low level spin, and then you start to see convection pop closer to the inner core, and then we can start to see that convection rotate a little bit more visibly, even more. Curious recon they work their way through that northwest center again, because this is ultimately where they found the strongest winds. They didn't even go through here, but I'm sure they find pretty strong winds there too. This northwest side is where they've been finding a lot of the strong hurricane force winds. I'm worried. I'm generally worried. Obviously, I say, you don't need to be worried if you're prepared. But I'm worried if you're not prepared. That's it, and I'm a little bit worried. that the people in the eastern South Carolina coastline and even that southern North Carolina coastline, I think some people are going to underestimate that this is going to be a significant storm. Don't view it as a weaker storm. That people are starting to view this now. This is what happens with second landfalls in the U.S. I'm going to say second landfall. Obviously, we talked about the semantics of being whether second or third landfall, whatever. It's technically a third landfall, but it's in theory, it's a second landfall. Technically, not technically, but it's a second landfall. People view it just as a weaker storm from what it was. Oh, it's not. Well, it's not what it was. Just don't view it as that. View it as a whole. View it just now. You have a Cat 1, Cat 2 hurricane that's going to make landfall. View it as that and not as a weaker system than what it was, thankfully. That's not how you should be viewing it. Thankfully, it is weaker. Thankfully, it's not another Cat 4. But if people don't have the illusion that it never was a Cat 4 and it's just its own hurricane, I think that would help a lot more. But people, you can't separate the two. And it's also it's sometimes it's less about the coastlines being susceptible and it's more about the onshore flow of this east side it's and the storm movement is going to allow it to push right into the coastline with and how the angle the coastline is set up. If you're pushing water right here, and you push that is a really good way. That's a really favorable position to get storm surge. And that's what goes into my thoughts when I'm thinking about possible storm surge numbers. So that's why I'm a bit concerned for eastern South Carolina coast and the far southern North Carolina coast as well. And if this veers off enough where it's even closer to North Carolina, we have to start talking about uh, even farther up, into possibly that central eastern North Carolina coastline as well. All right, so this convective burst did its job. So it's possible we saw maybe a 1-2 millibar pressure drop with this one. So now we got to look for to see when's the next one. How many more these convective bursts are we going to see form around the core, and allow this thing to continue to intensify? Or is this thing not done yet? And even though it's not producing the strongest of those possible, you know, -70 degree cold cloud tops, -50, -60 degree cold cloud tops with a bit of a hybrid system now, that could easily get the job done. And I guarantee by landfall, these are just going to be all green, yellows, and oranges, and there's not going to be any reds probably in landfall on the color scales. Yeah, I've been to Myrtle before. That's a fun place. That's a fun place, especially when I went when I was younger, when I was a kid. So I enjoyed it, especially when I was a younger kid, back when I was a young teen. Myrtle's fun, but hopefully they're not too devastated. Myrtle's big. They've been lucky in a lot of storms lately. Um, Maybe not Tampa lucky, but they've been pretty lucky. Yeah, I think Matthew was not quite as lucky. I think that's probably an exception. But even then, Matthew, there was thoughts that Matthew could get like to strong Cat 4, and luckily that didn't happen. Yeah, yeah. I think Myrtle's is going to be in a tough spot. They're going to be in a tough spot. It would take a track so far. Like this track would have to go so far It would have to go here to avoid that. But we're seeing north. It's going to probably continue to stay northeast movement, and then malls are advertising a little bit of a jog, and then probably something like this. Again, probably look for landfall. I'm not sure what's happening with these western jobs. If these are actually true, what recon's reporting, then this could throw a whole wrench, and that could make me look like an idiot. But even then, this would have to deviate like really west. And I said South Carolina would be like 70 20% North Carolina, 10% Georgia, 70% South Carolina. So I mean, it's not like I'm looking like a complete idiot, but I'm trying to actually really forecast and like really try to pin down stuff and see how where I go wrong. I'm trying not to go wrong, obviously, but I think I did like something like from here to here, and if I even combined it more, I would say from here to here. Somewhere is where I would go with for landfall. And I'm starting to think that maybe the National Hurricane Center showing center tracks on their cones is possibly not a good idea as well. It's more that you never hear meteorologists on their own. They never come up with their own center tracks. They go, it's going to be in the cone. Like they never come up with it. Like they're trying to forecast. Like as much as like their center tracks and what they put is it's really useful for weather enthusiasts and meteorologists because we know how to take that information. We know how to use that information, but the general public doesn't. They don't. They haven't taken meteorology classes. They haven't studied with the weather. They haven't tracked so many different storms. They haven't done that. They don't know center track, and I think that is a raise. That's starting to be a raising concern. I think, especially after this storm and what happened with the potential numerous lives lost, probably in part because of it, and not enough time to prepare for evacuations because of it. There's potentially lives lost in the hands of meteorologists here, and that's never what we're supposed to do. There's only so much we can do. We're trying our best to save people's lives in these things, but again, I'm not officially a meteorologist, I'm just weather enthusiast, but consider myself in that weather forecaster informer community. It's people like me it's my job to help inform and give the best information I can. And I think I did a pretty good job with that. I hope I did. At this storm, trying to inform people. You never saw me show center tracks, and I just gave areas where I think around where we could be seeing landfall. Even you remember, a lot of you remember, I was really skeptical of these western. I was leaning, I was leaning this more. These when they try to pull it here, I was like, hold up, we still got this trough. GFS is known for being progressive with troughs. GFS is the only one showing model runs out here, and it was like the dumb Canadian maybe too. We got the Euro handle these big time troughs usually a little bit better, at least in the medium range. We got a big time trough out here. Why isn't it going to feel this influence? It should feel this influence more. And I'm sure even way in the beginning when we were like 6 days out, I said, we saw even model runs into Louisiana. I was like, this is probably anywhere from here to here, I think is where we drew it. And it slowly became, I think we centered it down. From here, we got closer. From here to like here is where and I think we even brought it a little bit farther down. And then we went from here to like here. And then we even centered down more and more until we got closer. and noticing not one of those, like, I didn't like post official tweets or anything about that, but I gave my thoughts on stream. Yeah, not any of those tweets or not any of those streams did you see me go, I think landfall is going to be right here. Even though that's pretty close to where it was. I just drew a random spot on the map right there. There wasn't any thought into that. You never saw that. And I think that this could go a long way to not post center tracks in the future. I'm starting to think. But again, those center tracks are useful for meteorologists and weather enthusiasts. They're really useful. But I do wish National Hurricane Center didn't buy into the GFS as much. I wish they didn't buy into the GFS as much. That would have went a long way, I think. Because they had the track down initially, and then they played with it. They got a little cute. They played with it. They're not trying to be. They're trying to be the best they can, obviously, but I think they got sucked in just a little bit too much by some of the models here, and I would have liked to not see him pull the cone so much farther west. Because they pulled him here and then they like pulled him in, and then we saw models converge on like Tampa and like this kind of landfall for like maybe like 12 to 18 hours, and then National Hurricane Center honed in on Tampa. They put messages out, worst case scenario, Tampa, and I think that's once they put those out, I think that's where they're really that was costly. I think potentially for the people that live in here, where that storm surge was so impactful. Oh yeah, maybe maybe a little bit of a northeast jog instead of a northeast. Well, it's hard. The low level spin is so much broader now, so it's a little bit hard to see, and it's nighttime, so visible satellite isn't as available. Obviously, you only see dark at night. We'll see what the GFS did for track wise. I don't really care too much for intensity, although it has been getting even better on the intensity in terms of accuracy, which is good and bad news, I guess, depending on what it is. Let's see, 982 for 2 a.m. So that's pretty accurate. It's probably going to be bad. Um, and then for some reason, it weakens it a millibar and then strengthens it a few. So, I'm not going to put too much stock into the intensity, but how much does it intensify in track purposes? That's what I care more about. So I would still lean maybe a little bit east of the landfall, maybe even a little bit, a little bit. That's maybe too much, but that's still that's a reasonable spot where we could see a landfall. But I would lean a tick east. That's what my gut says. Still lean a tick east. And again, you can see it's a little bit like a nor'easter here, where the trough's pulling the moisture out in front of the system. So the moisture gets pulled north until it gets pulled farther east, and then we got big time flooding issues here. Big time, maybe 4 to 8+ inches of rainfall in those areas. See what HWRF does with it. I'm not sure how HWRF handles these extratropical systems, but H-Dwarf, I think it has maybe a decent idea. And here is my concern too. A lot of models have been trying to pull it. See that little northwest jog right before landfall? Really, all models have been indicating that. If we get that, at this point, the onshore flow is like this. That's the current onshore flow. And even then, that's a little, maybe too much. If we pull this east another frame now, so that's where, imagine that's where it was. That was the flow. Now we'll switch colors. Notice how the coastline is set up like this. It's not straight. So now with this little tug here, now we're pushing water this way. And this is directly, this is like awful. That's awful track for storm surge. And that puts this whole coastline at risk. And even here, because notice how the coastline shapes up here, the onshore flow is like this. So this completely F's this whole area right here. So that's not a good, it's so close in proximity, so you can see the onshore flow is still kind of like this, but even then it's still plenty, and straightens out even more up here. That is not a good track. That is not a good track for storm surge. A landfall right here is this whole area gets inundated with at least 48 feet of storm surge. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. With that kind of track. Now let's say I'm wrong and we can pull this here. This is going to be a little bit centered away from where some of the stronger winds are. So that's going to spare it a little bit more, but still really significant storm surge. Either way, this is why this track is not good. But this little tug northwest, that's a real killer. That's a real killer. And then the problem is too, watch what it does after it does that little tug northwest. And then it pulls north. It's like Ian's trying to F with the coast. Now look at the flow. It's still set up right. The onshore flow is set up right towards the coastline. Like, it's just, if that is like a worst case scenario given the ceiling of the system, right? The ceiling is not a powerful major hurricane. Given the ceiling of this system, this is a worst case scenario where we see this pull. It's pulling northeast and then a little jog, and then after landfall heads back north. That is not good. That is not good. This prolongs the storm surge for even longer and allows the onshore flow on the New Bern area and all the way down Myrtle Beach, and I forget to exact what city's close to here, but I think we got Charleston like over here, but this Charleston isn't this little defect in the coastline, so it's a little different. That is not a good scenario. So I'm actually probably even going to tweet this out at least after stream or at some point tomorrow if I forget, that this is the way this is set up is not good for them. And if we get it's not picking up on these winds. It's not H-Dwarf is it's doing trash with this right now. sorry, the mid-level winds, it's not the same because it's a hybrid, so it's not going to apply the same. But we'll do a reduction. We'll try to figure this out with the reduction. So these are like the flight level winds. We'll do the reduction ourselves. Notice the shift. You can see the way the curvature and the winds are. Notice it, these pockets, right? Shifting right onto the coastline with that little tug northwest, and then we play the next frame. Now notice the angle of the winds. Now it's different, and that is no bueno. In 85 knots, that's what does it peak out at, 80? I mean, now it starts to get a little bit less useful inland, but 85 knots. So 85 miles an hour. I should know that for future reference, that 85 knots is just 85 miles an hour at the surface. So obviously it's a little underdoing the winds because we're already at 85 miles an hour. And it's probably going to intensify at least a little bit more. What's recon? Are they going back into the center? I mean, they're not too far away from I mean, again, they're still finding those close to 70 knot, and they are finding 70 knot SMFR readings in that northwest quad still. Do we get a drop zone? That's still the old drop zone, which is 984 pressure. YouTube folks, sorry. I know I've been missing. We talked about, like a 10 out of 10 is like Hurricane Dorian. That's like the max. But that's the max kind of damage we see. This could have been worse if it could have been worse, but saying it could have been worse with all the damage that people did it's almost a little bit disrespectful. No, we're pretty clear on time. It's tomorrow, probably tomorrow afternoon is when we're looking for a landfall. Sometime tomorrow afternoon, I think. Somewhere probably 1 to 4 p.m., depending on where landfall happens. If it pulls a little bit farther north, it's more of a 4 p.m. landfall probably. So sometime 1 to 4 p.m. tomorrow is when we see landfall. And again, but if this slows down a little bit more, then we could slow down that timing to maybe like more 5 or 6 p.m. But probably 1 to 4 p.m. tomorrow we look for landfall. So another 12 to 15 hours the storm has to do whatever strengthening it's got to do. So we're probably going to be looking at 90 mile per hour, 90 to 100 mile per hour storm at landfall. Would be my guess. I don't know why they keep pulling this west. Maybe they're just finding different spots but that's a little bit complicated. I'll have to do some Twitter digging after the stream. The rainfall. Yeah, I was going to talk about that. I kind of already did a little bit, but we'll go. We'll go into a little bit more, and we can't do that with the HWRF. So right here's what we're talking about. It's already got a closed contoured line at 500 millibars. It's indicating that this already is it's kind of an upper level low that's already closed off. So already indicating the kind of we're a little bit of a hybrid system already. We get two closed contours. I mean, part of it is the low level, how strong the low level vorticity is still and how that's working. Remember, they work from the surface up. So closing contours at a different level of the atmosphere is with such powerful storms. It's not that uncommon. Obviously, it's not as powerful as it was, but it's still got that DNA. This is the vorticity. This is the DNA of the system that we're looking at. And then we get this big upper level low. I think Saturday into Sunday we look for prolonged flooding because look, this thing doesn't move really. It does not move. Does not move. And now we're pulling in Gulf. Oh, that's the wrong color. Pulling in Gulf moisture. We're pulling in Caribbean moisture into the system as well, along to go with the tropical DNA of Ian, that tropical moisture of Ian itself. I think, and this just looks like this is where it sets up this is the precip shield right here. So we're probably looking for all these spots to see some pretty significant heavy rainfall. Localized, maybe some localized totals over a half foot is possible. You can combine that. And then the upper level low sits around until it gets pulled up by a new trough. Which I just went to the wrong thing to demonstrate that. New trough pulls it off. And even tries to give me some more fun. Yeah, we could use some rain. We still got a little bit of a drought going on, even after that big flooding event a couple of weeks ago, or whatever, a few weeks ago, whenever that was. So we talked about it, right? Center of Ian is here, but out in front of it, you can see convection getting sheared off and pulled to the east. So tropical moisture gets pulled in, get pulled north and west, and then until a certain point where it gets, pushed off to the east from the mid-level flow, and at that point, that forces all these spots, to probably be in for anywhere from 4 to 8 plus inches of rainfall with some double-digit rainfall totals definitely in play for localized area. Maybe some places even get over a foot, combined with if you add up the totals that they've already seen. I have to imagine some places can end up with 12 to 18 inches of rain, and some of those really maxed totals. The difference is it's just more spread out. So 20 inches of rain in like a day is a bit different than like 20 inches of rain spread out over like 3 days, even though that's still, almost historic flooding, but I don't think we're going to see many 20-inch totals, if any. Probably more 12 to 15-inch max localized totals with a shot for a couple of 18-inch reports, one or two maybe, or maybe that even don't get reported, but that just happen with no report. But in general, probably the higher end totals are 6 to 12 inches with 4 to 8-inch likelihood. For all these people, even back into here. And then this kind of a whole different setup. This is a whole different setup, basically. that we just went over. So probably a lot of 3 to 6 inch stuff, I'm guessing, in the Mid-Atlantic. This stuff's probably more 1 to 3 inch stuff in the Northeast, and then more 3 to 6 inch stuff in the Mid-Atlantic with some localized 6+ inch totals, which could cause for some significant flooding. Could be some significant flooding, especially over the Appalachians. We could see some runoff into rivers, and when we see rivers start to get into flood stage possible. I don't know where the rivers are at, so I don't have any of that data, but I don't have that kind of time based on what I've been doing the last week. But yeah. NOAA outlook for rain. You want to see the Weather Prediction Center, their thoughts? I mean, we can pull that up on the National Hurricane Center website. They post all the graphics. Oh, 980 weekend. Am I missing something? Or is that just an old advisory? Okay. That was just an old advisory. I was like, why is the pressure 4 millibars stronger, but the wind's 10 miles an hour less? That confused me. That F took me for a second. Okay. Oof. That was from last night. Yeah, that would have been crazy. Oh, rainfall. Yeah, that's the Weather Prediction Center's thought. You can see they're kind of similar. They got 2 to 4, 4 to 6 inch totals. That's basically what I'm talking about too. And then what you see is here, it's kind of like a front almost, and this pulls in dry air. So like the upper level low kind of gets split in two, and we're pulling in tropical moisture combined with the Ian remnants. So it's almost like in the beginning, little show that everyone gets into the upper level low originally. Everyone in here gets into the rainfall originally with that upper level low. Obviously it extends out a little bit more. I'm just trying to draw the general area. But then after Saturday, once we get into Sunday and more rainfall happens, it kind of splits into two parts. Where here, somewhere there's going to be a screw zone somewhere in here, and then all the way up into here it gets their own kind of show of heavy rainfall. Somewhere in between, there's probably going to be a screw zone, though. I'm just warning you. But that won't be too bad because you've already seen a good amount of rainfall and saturation, so that'll probably be good news. Because you obviously don't want flooding. Flooding's bad. It's pretty self-explanatory. But again, right where, wherever the inner core hits, that's probably where we see the potential with, given that we've been seeing, rainfall out ahead of this trough, push some significant totals. That's where your best shot for, combined with rainfall totals over the past few days, that's where your best shot for double-digit rainfall totals will be. I think that covers the rainfall pretty good. The flooding, hopefully. Oh, the Weather Prediction Center probabilities for not lightning, for likelihood of rainfall. Yeah, that's the weather. I think did they put that on their website too? Yep, they do. Yeah, so they're talking about, you can see, demonstrating that flood. They think they're highlighting this as their main concern area over the next 3 days. and then they do by they do by day. So I think this is for tonight. You can see they got slight, and they got uh, Saturday. They have a moderate risk, and then looks like kind of just that same area I just drew. This is their risk for flash flooding anywhere in here. See how this line kind of comes up? It's showing that it's kind of the split into two parts at that point with the upper level low. With the center of the upper level low over here, and then kind of gets split apart. There's still tropical moisture fueling up the East Coast, the actual East Coast. I know we consider like all this the East Coast, but the actual East Coast, the coast. It's already, I want to show you, what, because I know like these maps are good and they're informative to look at, but I also, it's hard. This is such a large area, so I can't like. It's hard to disagree with rainfall in such a large area, but I want to make sure I give my own give you guys my own thoughts and analysis when doing this. Because if I just lawfully abided by the the government with their weather thoughts, that wouldn't separate me at all, and I wouldn't have the following I do right now. So I want to make sure I present my own thoughts and analysis too, and not just their maps, and utilize their maps. And not trying to say I'm something special or anything, but I have learned myself with these forecasts, to make my own. So I gotta share my thoughts too. And a lot of times my thoughts are just sometimes a step ahead in the National Hurricane Center, or not necessarily a step ahead, but something that they're thinking but not wanting to put into their actual forecast they currently have put out. That applies to not just hurricane season, winter season too. And I'm not as smart as severe weather as I am with tropical and winter. And even then, I'm smarter at tropical than I am with winter, or vice versa, opposite, not vice versa, the opposite. But you can see this is their peak surge map too that they have. I'm thinking we could see some totals higher in here. I'm guessing that these aren't going to be 4 to 7 feet, and these are going to be all more, 3 to 5 feet, 3 to 6 feet. That's what I would guess, unless we see more of a landfall here. But probably, this whole area is probably the best shot to see. I'd argue 4 to 8 plus feet of storm surge. And maybe if this thing gets to 100 mph Cat 2 with like a 970 pressure, maybe approaching 9-10 feet, maybe. We would have to wait months for the analysis anyways, and we're gonna have to wait months anyways, but it looks like those storm surge totals verified along the Florida Gulf Coast. On here maybe 15 plus feet, 15 feet I saw up to maybe more. We'll have to figure out eventually. I'm concerned about the Cape Coral area. I haven't heard many reports, and I feel like it's weird because I feel like people have been going over, but I feel like just people are going over the areas that have been heard and talked about. I haven't seen a lot of reports of the Cape Coral area, and someone tweeted it. I was interacting with I think Jacob like Fierstein. I forget how to say his last name, but Fierstein or something. Jacob Fierstein. I think that's how you say his name. I was interacting with him on Twitter tonight or earlier tonight, and he was saying how surprised he was about seeing the lack of reports out of Cape Coral too, because that's a pretty populated area. That's maybe the most populated area in that Southwest Florida region. So the fact we're not hearing a lot about reports out of there is either really good news or it's really bad news. So I'm surprised we didn't hear more reports from them because they were right in the thick of it, of that eye wall, right on the onshore flow too, right next to Fort Myers Beach, just a little bit uh, to the south. Fort Myers Beach, they were right in the, or just to the west. Yeah, I mean it's hard. Just inland on Cape Coral can be a little bit different than like the coast. So Cape Coral, there it's a populated area, so Cape Coral is, there's a lot of inland places in Cape Coral, but this coastline, and especially here and here, that can be a little bit different. So the Cape Coral is, like, it's one of the larger places, larger populated areas, so it's a little bit different. And this is Fort Myers Beach, where we've seen a lot of stuff in Sanibel Island. This is the causeway that got damaged. Chesapeake. Yeah, I mean it's kind of expected that like the barrier islands were going to get hit hard, but at the same time, like that's it's expected if we see these ridiculous totals verify, and they did. So that was not good. That was awful to see. Obviously, Chesapeake Bay storm surge. I mean, let me take a look at the map for reference. It looks like they don't think, and I'd probably have to agree with that too. I don't think. I'm not sure where Bonita Beach is. Is that a town or is that like an actual beach? I'll look in a second. I don't. I don't think Chesapeake Bay is going to get too much storm surge just because the system's not going to be strong enough at that point to maybe like maybe a few inches of water rise, maybe more than usual. It's possible a little bit more water rise than usual, I guess, just because it will be a little bit gusty and um, maybe during high tide you see a little bit of beach erosion and maybe a little bit of more beach flooding than you usually do. But other than that, I don't think storm surge in Chesapeake Bay is going to be too big of an issue. Now, also too, the way the coastline shaped up, notice how just each one it gets more, starts here and then gets more and more curved as we get up the coastline. That wasn't necessarily true, but it's the way it sets up. This is going to allow, right? So we got going here, onshore wind this way, and then this way, and then this way, and then this way, and then here. So we could have to watch out for some significant surge. Maybe not even, maybe a little bit more than 2 to 4, maybe 3 to 5 plus feet, but also 2 is possible storm surge this way because those northeast winds associated with the trough could maybe push water onto this way. So this is really almost a perfect. It's not. It's hard to get. It's going to be hard to get life threatening surge here just because the winds aren't going to be strong enough, etc. But this is really a perfect setup to get big time surge totals, really all along North Carolina and South Carolina, eastern South Carolina coast. Well, my thoughts are sometimes wrong, so I'll be wrong at some point somewhere. Just a heads up. But the analysis, I promise, even if I am wrong with what I think it's going to happen, I promise you I will not relay you a scenario that's not going to happen. And if I do, then that means probably no one else has talked about that possible scenario. And even though I'm wrong, we'll go down on the ship together. So I try to be right. I take pride in being right. So it looks like we're getting some more convection of pop in here now. It's a little bit farther away from the inner cores. Probably not inner core convection, but still. It's close. We look for the closer the better for intensification. That's what we're looking for if we want to see intensification. Obviously, we don't want to see intensification, but if we want to see intensification, you know, because it's just what we're forecasting. I'm trying to compare it to what we're looking for in the likelihood of. You know, it's not like oh, we want it to intensify. No, we don't want it to intensify, but that's what we're looking for. Honestly, a little bit of convection. It looks like it's showing a little bit of sign of connected to the low level spin. It's hard to tell at this point because it's so offshore, and then you have this convection here that's kind of making it hard to see the beam all the way through, making it a little bit difficult to see. And imagine if there was a big eye wall here, it would be harder to see the eye wall, the eastern eye wall, than it would be the western eye wall because the convection from it is covering it. So convection is convection, regardless if it's eye wall or not. And this is making it, you know, it would be hard to see in general what's going on over here. But this is making it a little bit harder. But that's just part of the storm. It's not like we can ask it to go away. But again, notice, right? We keep talking about this. This is the center, and then the rainfall gets pushed this way, and this way, and this way, and then it meets this point into the trough until it gets kind of sheared away and gets pushed off along the front, along the boundary. And this is where we're seeing all this rainfall here tonight. With this as our precip shield. And then this precip shield will rise as it gets closer. So we'll see more heavy rainfall back into here probably as well. Eventually. And then obviously the upper level low forms in a whole new scenario of flooding potential. Yeah, it's possible. The perfect storm formed in the Gulf of Mexico. And we saw Alabama, Georgia, even the Florida Panhandle see inches of snow along the Panhandle, and then feet of snow. Panhandle saw inches of snow, and then we saw feet of snow. I mean, what's it called? Storm of the century. 14-foot snowdrifts on Mount Mitchell. That'd be something to see. I want to see that shit. 43 inches of snowfall in Syracuse. Damn. I could use a good 40-inch storm. Yeah, take a look at Alabama. 20 inches of snowfall here in Alabama. In Georgia, too. 2 feet of snow in Georgia. Yeah, here we go. You can see it. Notice that snowfall all the way down to Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama coastline, all the way down here, and even 10 to 20 inches up through here. These analyses aren't always perfect, but they just give the general view, especially for storms in the past, so far in the past, where these analyses work well enough. This is actually a Weather Willie. That's Weather Willie's profile picture right here. This one. So I'll always remember that as the satellite for the 1993 storm of the century. Let's say this analysis looks to be a little bit better too. I guess it's the same thing, just different color contours. Yeah, but that was one freak. So yeah, it can happen. We can see snowstorms right up the coast. I mean, this is kind of like it because we're seeing phase. So I mean, you can see snow anywhere. Meteorology, where anything is possible, it's possible. It's literally possible. So it's just not likely. It almost never happens. But maybe I eat my words and it happens this year. But even then, it almost never happens. That statement will still be true. I mean, even the last few years, we've had a couple of big southerly snowstorms where, places like Louisiana and Mississippi have gotten like 4 to 8 inches of snow. And, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana seeing 4 to 8 inches of snow. I think we even saw them see it like a couple times in one winter, or like 3 times in the last 2 winters, or 2 times, or at least back to back winters, something like that. So that they've had some snowfall events the past couple of years. I don't think you're going to get anything from Ian in Mississippi. Um, I guess sadly for you, since you want rain, but uh, Ian's not the one to ask for. Yeah, you're right about that, God Church. Probably not the one for him. Well, some of this looks like it's just more energy out ahead of the trough. You play this all the way through. Barely any rainfall from Mississippi. Just high pressure. Oh, that is something to watch on the GFS. I mean, I say that's like 300 hours out, but it's always an origin point for the storm. And then we could have more stuff to track down the line too. Guess I can bring that up now. I want to be on the record a little bit. We may need to watch out for the Caribbean in 1 to 2 weeks. 1 to 2 weeks. We may need to watch out for the Caribbean. And anything that goes in the Caribbean has got 3 paths. Central America, Mexico, Gulf of Mexico, or get close to the U.S., even if it is out to sea. One of those 3 got to happen when it gets into the Caribbean. And I'm not talking Eastern Caribbean. I'm talking, deep down into the Caribbean. Down the line. There's not even a need to worry or even think about it, because it just could be nothing. But I just want to be on the record. We could have another something to track, 1 to 2 weeks from now. And we'll watch for development with this one. This one could be Julia next week. We could have to watch for Julia to form next week. And what this one is to watch for This is a big dome of high pressure, and immediately I'm thinking if this is weak enough, this is going to stay under the high pressure, and it's either got to go here, or if it's weak enough, slide here. One of those two things got to happen. That's if it doesn't beat the high pressure. If this high pressure doesn't get here quick enough, then we have to watch for this heading farther, for this to head out and just recurve a few hundred miles off the coast of Africa. That will be the next one to watch after Ian. Not even a close to a U.S. threat for now, but because it still has to form, even we have to look for it to form. But that could be the next one to form. You see this one, and the high pressure doesn't get there quick enough, and it high pressure doesn't get there quick enough until it does get there quick enough, and then this is just getting bullied by dry air and wind shear, and then it gets stuck and just kind of dies out. Well, I guess it gets weakened and then pushed along the ridge. I don't buy it. I wouldn't buy that even. I'm just looking at specific model runs. Yeah, AccuWeather. I don't know what their idea is with that stuff, but they do them. The only person in context I like is Bernie for wintertime tracking. His analysis. There's a lot of other stuff like his personal opinions and some of the stuff is political views. He's pretty out there politically, and he doesn't hide it. If you look for it just a little bit, he doesn't hide it. He's a little bit out there, which I don't ever want to get political. But that doesn't mean I agree with everybody's thoughts at the same time. He's a little some of his thoughts a little bit out there. But in terms of knowledge of weather and stuff, I'm able to learn from him. Bernie's a really good source for especially tracking snowstorms. We'll have plenty of time to look at the long range. What's going on now? All right, well, this convection's popping closer to the center now, so I lied a little bit. I didn't lie, but just needed more to come in. Looks like some more are starting to pop, maybe on the southwestern side now. So notice even the trough is just wants to pull this convection eastward. But now more convection pop in here. Nope. More convection pop in here. That scroll thing is kind of cool, but it messes with me a lot. My pinned tweet on my Twitter, yeah, I can explain that one. It's not really relevant to right now, so I wanted to cover a lot of stuff right now, mainly, but I can, yeah. And I'll quote tweet this whenever we get past hurricane season 2. People are curious, but this was earlier over the summer when I was bored out of my mind in terms of weather stuff, there's really nothing to talk about. So we didn't have any activity on this account for a lot of summer. Mainly busy in the summer, very busy in the summer, but also there's nothing I really wanted to talk about. But then I started getting the past winter storm stuff. Started watching a lot of past of Billy's streams, and because believe it or not, Twitter advanced search beautiful for looking at past snowstorm stuff. Beautiful. So I started using that, looking at some of the past Billy streams, because I'm just generally curious about snowstorms, and he has really good content. So we started looking into that, and that, I think something around there inspired this tweet. But we did a lot of snowstorm, and then that even made me put out some of my stuff, my reanalysis of winter storms. And then I started, I was like, I think I need to improve the stream setup. And that's what led me here. We improved the stream setup. We got 720 quality, 720 HD quality now, compared to like the 344, 480p quality before, whatever Twitter decided crappy quality wanted to do. Shitty quality. So yeah, that's kind of inspired it, and I was like, yeah, get a new mic. We'll get the pen tool. We'll get fire up a screen share, a stream service we can get too. And that's how that led me here. But that's basically what I'm talking about. The inspiration behind this tweet a little bit, but this was even before I started to get the stream ideas. But this is basically covering, a lot of times you see these maps, they're BS. I'm sorry. The people, I'm not trying to offend the people. If the people that make these maps ever see this, I'm sorry. But they're BS too. You're just going off. You can never. A lot of times these do verify, but not like areas in it. But they're never perfect. They're never perfect. There's so many people that live in between that, even just in this little area. Look how big the U.S. is, and then just this little area itself. If you get this wrong, you're going to hear about it from 50, 60 million freaking people. So these maps that they make, they're not designed to be good. They're not designed to be exact and accurate. So when I talk about this, seasonal temperature, believe it or not, does not have to do really anything with snowfall. It does, but it doesn't. It doesn't, because snowfall, think about how long a snowstorm takes. Within the day, the storm is not there, come, gone, and it's in the past. Within a day, like 8 out of 10 snowstorms, 9 out of 10 snowstorms are like that. So all it takes is the right temperature it's really less about temperature and the setup that creates the temperatures. The setup at 500 millibars that can create the temperature. And you can even be an above average temperature than what you usually are and still get a snowstorm. You can be 35 degrees and get a big snowstorm. So you can have an above average snowfall year without being below average temperature wise. So you can be way above average temperature wise and still get an above average snow year. It's just maybe the snow melts a lot faster and you get a lot more melting periods. That's really it. Vice versa, you cannot get a lot of snow but be really cold for a lot of time, especially in this area. You can be really cold. And then what you're going to want, John, is these suppression setups now. Is what you're going to want. Even then, you can still get these inland setups. You're going to take advantage of those. So you're really actually in a pretty decent spot mid-Atlantic wise. But suppression setups where the precip shield gets cut off here, and then you got this whole big cold high pressure system that's got really cold temperatures. And even if cold temperatures would be all the way back here, because this trough's pulling in cold air all the way through here. and that would move out through here, and the cold train goes through. So it comes out or stays in place depending on the pattern, if you have a consistent cold pattern. And then you get cold, but you get no snowfall. No snowfall happens in that pattern. So you can stay cold and not get a lot of snowfall as well. So that's why the two aren't directly correlated a lot of times, much of the winter. And that's kind of the point of this whole spiel. And then the next part of it is the polar vortex you have to track as well. And the polar vortex is going to man, my TV's in sleep mode, and some of the colors it does with this 4K resolution are just off the charts, man. It's kind of satisfying. I was just looking at it, sorry. But the polar vortex is really what we look at to control winter. Polar vortex is key. Polar vortex is really key. This picture right here, this is the polar vortex. It's this cold air up by the Arctic. That's why they call it Arctic air, literally. And then once the jet stream becomes more wavy, we maybe see a polar vortex disruption, and this cold air gets brought down. Sometimes these can last for maybe it's just a week or something, days. Sometimes it's multiple weeks, even sometimes a couple months if it gets really stuck. And then we see more wavy jet stream pattern, and sometimes that can hurt you or help you depending on where you are set up. But that's what we look for. We look for high pressure. We look for high pressure that builds over Mexico, and this high pressure comes up and builds over the mountain west. And then we see a low pressure ride up the East Coast. That's what we look for dynamic. That's what we look for big snowstorms. It doesn't always have to be this way, and there's different patterns, different ways the polar vortex, but that's just a classic pattern. That's a classic pattern from the polar vortex. Those Arctic blasts. The only place I would disagree with you is that those Arctic blasts, where do those Arctic blasts in the Northeast come from? They come down from Arctic, but they move through the Midwest first. Those are nothing like those Midwest Arctic outbreaks. Those are probably that's the coldest area you're going to get in the U.S. ever at all times, besides like elevation. And this is why it's deceiving. Those maps can be deceiving too, because you can be above average for 3 months into the winter, and then all of a sudden February comes, and then March comes, and you get 80 inches of snow in really consistent cold temps for much of that period. But that's going to cancel out, and maybe still not even be enough to cancel out those warm temperatures you saw in the first half of the winter. So that's why those maps are deceiving as well. Even though they do it in 3-month intervals, even within that 3-month intervals that can be skewed and not directly correlated. Temperature may not be directly correlated with snowfall. So that's why I say anybody that you see those dumb, this is for you YouTube folks too, Twitter folks know about this. When you see people put those winter outlooks out there with cold, or I'm sure you all know Ryan Hall, how much snow exactly is going to happen. Ryan is changing the game for weather on YouTube. I think he's a really good person, and I think he means well. But he gets caught up in some of those clickbait stuff, and he knows too. You can't really, and it's less Ryan. Ryan's just kind of mixed. He's established himself as doing really good weather analysis, so sometimes it gets frustrating when he puts some of those thumbnails, because a lot of people, and I think sometimes he's better than some of that clickbait. He doesn't need to do it. I think he's so big at this point, he doesn't even need to do it. But direct weather, any of you that like direct weather, you don't need direct weather. I promise you, they're much better sources. direct weather, you can get a lot better sources of information. And so that's why I say no one can tell you exactly of how much snow you're going to see. So whenever you see those winter outlooks that happen, that come out in like August and September and October, even October, but mainly those August, September winter outlooks, they're complete, excuse my language, but they're complete bullshit. Utter bullshit. They're complete freaking bullshit. That's what they are. They're not whatever relevant. These are many times people who are unexperienced meteorologists too, and there's a reason they're unexperienced, because they're putting out forecasts like that, or they're putting out forecasts like that because they're unexperienced, vice versa. That's to my point. You don't want to go there for winter outlooks. I know. I at a point watched direct weather. Yeah, shocker. Hyped up storms that never happened. Can you believe it, John? Can you believe it? Direct weather hyped up a storm and it didn't happen. Are you kidding me? Shocker. That's a shocker right there. That's a shocker. I mean, that's just what he does. He's what he does. I know, right? Unbelievable. I never thought he would do that either. That's just what he does. But we'll move on from the winter part. But you two people were curious, so had to. But we lost all the Twitter folks on that. I can't blame them too, because we kind of got off topic. But it looks like the 2 a.m. advisory came out, so we'll take a look at that. Take a little peep. I'm sure they didn't change anything, but maybe they did. Nope. 984, 85 mile per hour hurricane. That's still wild to see. It just went over landfall. All that landfall. Now it's back out into the open Atlantic. It's an 85 mile per hour hurricane again. Like, what are we doing here? You just can't catch a break. It's possible, and we could just see it maintain intensity. Like we see it drop millibars in pressure maybe, and just doesn't intensify wind speed wise. It's possible too. Yeah, I mean, they got to be done, right? Yeah, they're finished with their mission. They did a lot of passes, and thank you to the folks that worked that Air Force low level reconnaissance flight. Thank you for the folks that worked that. That was very useful information that we were able to get there, and that helped upgrade the storm. Recon is out. They're finished with their flight, very deservedly so, though. They did plenty of passes, like 3-4 passes. And look at that. I think they even went here. That little jog east was the west jog was all for nothing, canceled out by the east jog. Who knows what that was? But did we get another drop zone to the eye? We did. And it was 16-hour reduction, so 984. So not really intensifying, it looks at the moment, but I thought that convective burst was going to maybe help intensify it a little bit more. It looks like it wasn't. Or maybe they just didn't get the strongest. The center is pretty wide. It's not wide, but broad. So there's not like a complete clear center point at the strongest pressure. There's probably a few 3-4 points where they could drop. They could find the lowest pressure. Yeah, still definitely firing on this west side here, closer, even more now. Whoa, that's blowing up over here, right over here, right next to the center, just west to the center, blowing up. Looks like you can see here, you can see the low level spin, but now it's starting to cover. You can see you see the grays here. These are some minus 10, minus 20 degree cloud tops are starting to cover some of the low level spin. Starting to cover that more, and the more convection we get closer to the inner core is going to allow for some of those more tropical like characteristics to take out and that's where you see a little bit more of that tropical intensification rather than the baroclinic intensification. It's just at that point, remember we talked about how it made that transition now from a tropical to an extratropical system. So at that point, it's no longer tropical, and it would have to take days of being in the right environment after being extratropical to maybe retransition back into a tropical storm. We've seen that before, and we've even storms, especially a lot of times in the spring, where they start as maybe it's some vorticity gets pushed off a front, and then it gets disconnected with the front, and then it's eventually able to form into its own little uh, low level vorticity, its own little low level spin. So we've seen that before, but that's not what we're going to be seeing. It's not going to be favorable enough for that to happen. So at that point, it's just going to be an upper level low, and we're not going to have to worry about it being a tropical, make a tropical transition at that point. Hopefully that answers that. To plug in the Mac right here. Well, we talked about that a little bit. It's part of the upper level low. So it's connected. It's part of Ian's remnants basically. It's kind of the upper level low. It gets I should have used this more. I should have used the Eastern U.S. format more, but so what was Ian, right? And then it becomes the upper level low. The upper level low dies out, and it kind of gets stretched out along the boundary, and then it looks like a weak low pressure forms off that boundary, and then what's left of it looks like a new upper level low forms. Or was that I meant to pull out 500? Damn it! So that was 850 the whole time. So what was Ian forms right into a upper level low. Upper level low dies out, kind of sheared apart. Um, it's sheared apart latitude cyclones is a little bit different than the saying doesn't really apply the same way as it does with tropical cyclones. But bro, this shit battery shit drains so fast. This shit drains so fast, John. Can't even tell you. Then we get the upper level low, and then kind of upper level low dies out. But then what's left of the upper level low with a little bit of injection from this cutoff low that's way out here. There's another cutoff low to the west, injects a piece of energy into this old cutoff, which upper level cutoff low at that point. And when we inject 500 millibars vorticity into other 500 millibar vorticity, we're gonna get something to happen. And it looks like that's what we get. We get a new upper level low form, but this is just so far out. So, we're probably not going to stream and track this. Probably not, but probably some remnants of a little bit of Ian tropical moisture, maybe, but and probably pulling in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico as well. But other than that, this is it. That's not really Ian. Maybe a few remnants of Ian, but no, this has my attention. That's snow, of course, but it's like it's almost fantasy range. No, it's 500 millibar vorticity is what it's measuring. So it's not more windy. Sometimes the stronger the spin can be bigger winds, but when we look for pressure, we look for how close wind is defined by our models. What we look for is how close are these isobars together. The closer together they are, the more wind is. So here we have the high pressure gradient and the low pressure gradient, and so that's also something I guess we could watch for is when Ian, what's left of Ian, gets out of here, and maybe even whatever's left forms a new low that tries to form up and right offshore, maybe impact the northeast and southern New England. Maybe I don't know. That's way down the line. We're still focused on what Ian's going to do. Notice high pressure here and then low pressure here. Wherever high pressure and low pressure meet, we're going to see a pressure gradient, and pressure gradients create strong winds. So this isn't a ridiculous pressure gradient, but this is probably enough to create some 25, some 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts probably. So they'll probably, that's why it'll still be gusty. Looks like Sunday, not really that windy probably, maybe a little bit of gusty, maybe like 15, 20 miles per hour on on Sunday. Saturday will be more gusty than Sunday because there's still a little bit. That's more of directly of what Ian is. So probably and you have high pressure to your north, creating a little bit of a pressure gradient. So it looks like Saturday could be a little bit windy in the mid Atlantic. This area. Sunday not so much. Then the low forms. The high pressure starts to. This high pressure kind of shears off upper level low, and that's why you see it lose latitude because dry air pushes this moisture down, doesn't allow it to come any farther north, kind of steers the storm away, offset to the south and east until that new one forms. But that high pressure with that very weak low pressure, but still slight low pressure, creates a little bit of a pressure gradient. And we see some stronger winds, probably some. Excuse me, need a sip of water. Some 20, probably some 25, maybe 35 mile per hour max wind gusts. So that's not really too significant. But at 500 millibars, to answer your original question, this is how strong the spin is at 500 millibars in the atmosphere. Remember, we talked about different levels of the atmosphere. So if this is the top, this is 0 millibars, and that's 250, 500, 750, 700, 850, and then this is the surface, 1,000 millibars, roughly. Obviously, that's the more like a low pressure, but that's just the closest round. That's rounded to the closest. So this is 500 millibars in the atmosphere, and this is what we do. We're going to 500 millibars every snowstorm stream. I promise you, we will go to 500 millibars, and most likely we will go to 500 millibars first. Every stream. Like 3/4 of my tweets will probably be about 500 millibars. Especially like especially like more than 48 hours out too. And even within that will be tons of 500 millibars. Tons of it. 500, it runs everything in my opinion. Obviously there's different levels of the atmosphere, but runs everything for forecasting. Even tropical systems. But 500 tells you everything that you can tell everything that's going on in the atmosphere from just 500. You can tell everything. When I say everything, like, there's exceptions, but like you can tell almost everything that's happening with 500 millibar. Almost everything would be better because obviously you can't tell every single aspect because there's more levels of the atmosphere, but you can you can pretty much almost see how much you can get to from five just looking at 500 millibars in the setup, and you can get it in your head already. But this is just measuring how strong the spin is at 500 millibars. It's called 500 millibar 500 millibar cyclonic vorticity. Exact term. Yeah, but it's not super accurate. This is 10-meter winds, but it can't push these inward, so these are sustained winds. It doesn't work inland for some reason. It can't figure out the 10-meter wind speeds inland. It only does well with it offshore or like right on the coast for some reason. So like there's some sort of flaw. But you can also there's wind barbs. Notice all the wind barbs here. They're all over the map, and you can if you know how to read wind barbs. I suck at that. I have to get better at that because that's a really important part of being a weather guy, being a meteorologist. I'm gonna have to get better at that. But you can read wind barbs, and that tells you how strong. Like if there's like one barb, there's like 10 knots, and there's another barb, it's 20 knots, and then there's like it's half a barb, it's 25 knots, etc. And then like a barb with like two notches on it is like 20 knots or something. I don't know. That's something like that. But I have to get better at that. But if you know how to read wind barbs, you can just tell it too. So, and then I could go to like pivotal too, but I'm not gonna go. I have to like sign into account, and I don't want to show you all that stuff right now. I don't want to show password stuff. I don't want to delay the stream just to like show you how wind models do with wind gusts. And that's why I don't show you a lot of what the models produce exactly. Um, you mean wind barbs? I think you meant wind bars, but yeah, I think you meant wind barbs. So, yeah, sorry, John. Uh, Snowstorm spin. I mean, yeah. I mean, the storm itself, the vorticity. It's just the spin is more visible in the mid levels of the atmosphere than it is the low levels. But like, it's not like the snow bands like spin around. That's not different than like a hurricane. But the center of it, strong vorticity. There's a strong spin at 500 millibars a lot of times with these snowstorms. It's not always needed for every snowstorm setup, but yeah. And again, I was saying I don't show a lot of the wind stuff on these models because remember I like to tell you and show you what's gonna happen. Use the models to tell you what I think the actual physical impacts are going to be, and not just go over you. Well, this model shows 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts. This model shows 70 mph. This model shows 60. This shows 90, 100. I don't want to go through all that because then how is that providing you with any helpful data? This is just providing you with all different kinds of model runs and different scenarios. I can I can use that information to tell you all the different scenarios regardless, and I can cut down on all those unlikely scenarios, and I can just give you like clear cut possible on the table scenarios. All of a sudden my voice has just started to go here a little bit for some reason in the last 5 minutes. I don't know why, but I'm coughing like every second now because of my voice giving out. And I don't want to drink a ton of water before bed. Let's see what Twitter sphere is saying. When do I wake up? I mean, I went to bed at like 6 that one night and then woke up at 10:30. So, but I try to get 7, 8 hours. My current schedule allows me to not having to worry about getting up early right now. If I went through and explained my my whole personal spiel of what my life is like, you may not understand. It'd be not like you wouldn't understand it, just you wouldn't understand why I do what I do personally. This year for me is a bit different than most people would do have in life, but it allows me a little bit more freedom right now. But I won't go any further than that. I don't like revealing a lot of personal stuff to the internet. The internet can do weird things. I promise I'm a good person, though. I am a good person. I promise you're not going to find some sort of scandal on me. I need a. Is it not usually 63? Is that way too cold? Oh, I guess so. Oh, here's what I was going to do. I wanted to turn the Weather Channel on again. Yeah, well, these power outages are about to go back up. Not in Florida, but South Carolina, North Carolina, about to rack up some power outages. Yeah, I love the dedication of YouTube folks. They're loving to. They want to learn. They want to learn. I like it. See any more convection popping? Doesn't look like it. I wonder if we're getting a new recon in soon. Oh, euro. We can check the euro. We don't really have any information. It looks like it. Sadly, I guess we could look at 18Z. 977. And that left turn too. That's when it makes that left turn. That's about when this thing is going to be like borderline cold core fully. Like this is getting pulled in is the stream interaction at this point. So this is our trough, and now it's starting to get sucked in a little bit more stream interaction wise. We're seeing more full stream interaction, and that's why we see that left turn get pulled in, and then it goes back to the northern turn. So that's a little stream interaction right there for you. Not a full phase or anything, but like we saw with Fiona. Fiona was a full phase, and that's why it was such a big pullback that it pulled the storm in. So back west, pulled in the storm back west. Muffled my words right there. Two hours, 4 minutes of fully charged. I'm curious what the New Orleans tropical storm. No, I'm just kidding. Orleans is the name of that one. Name of that bad boy. Well, we'll see what they put out. Oh, I'm glad you guys. Oh, we got. Luckily, we're at 33%, but we gotta charge the iPad too. Otherwise, I won't be able to see any Twitter comments. So we'll transfer that. I'm glad you feel like you found a hidden gem. Hopefully, we're gonna be we do some good analysis. Anything I do in life, I put max. Anything I care about, I tend to put maximum effort in. So, I care about the weather. I'm passionate about the weather. So you're gonna get I'm gonna do my best to get to show the best analysis I can. So anytime we do any of these streams, I'm gonna do my best to give important, hopefully good important information. What are you talking about, Ian? Current Ian, not past Ian? Yeah, we're gonna watch that later. I guess we can watch that right now. Take a look at that bad boy, Ian. Already lost 1%. Are you kidding me? And it's just frustrating. Yeah, it's like a tornado. Pulled them out. Man, they're gonna have to get Weather Channel's got to get some people. They got to get some people. I know, like they got the damage, but they got to get some people up in South Carolina. They're gonna take a big hit there. They got to get more people up there. You can't just have one person because you got to have multiple shifts so they can sleep. I like this. I was actually gonna say this. The probability of put it like a cone within the cone. Put a center track within the put a not a center track, but instead of the center track, put the center track as a cone, so a probability area, or you think landfall is going to happen based on the current cone, so it's like a cone within a cone. I think that that might be a good idea. And I got a lot of people I got to answer too. About I want to get their thoughts on I want to get their thoughts on what they think of what needs to improve in forecasting between forecasters and the communication, because it was clearly not good enough with the storm if with so many people caught off guard. This dude Dylan Federico, he took a lot of heat today for videoing a cat during a hurricane. Man, people will find anything to piss them off. I'm not a big political guy, but I want to read that later. Seriously, we're posting this. This is what we're posting. Come on now. We've been really concerned with a lot of his posts. To be honest, I just follow him at this point out of respect for the point. Just out of respect. But I don't really like a lot of the content he posts now. It's a lot of weedy stuff. I'm keeping it real. You can see here, starting to get pulled in. So it's a little bit like a feeder band, but at the same time, it's like its own front forming. The way the convection is forming, more front-like. But it's also kind of pulling in. The edge of this band is pulling in. And it looks like this convection isn't quite waning yet right away. It's holding well enough and now covering the low-level center too. So Wonder, do we get a... That was it. 0 is UTC. So 06C will be a... We'll probably get that update in like a half hour. I'm curious what they have their best, the best track will be at. That sounds like one word, but it's 2 words. The best track. Best track. That makes it sound like one word, but best track is 2 words. You know it's late when we're talking like that. We get 0Z, maybe load. Nope. All right. Actually, you can see that feeder band. You can see a little bit of that feeder band pulling in like that, like you could see on a satellite. You see that? That little convection on radar is this stuff right here. You see that? That's kind of neat. You'll have to wait till 3 a.m. for that. We won't be still streaming at that point. All right, now it's starting to wane. Held together for a little while, but it's starting to wane now. That was the old convective burst, new one, so this will just basically replace that. And then it looks like it wants to form a new one after. So it looks like it's CV burst after CV burst initiated from the trough originally, and then kind of as it gets pulled in closer into the low level center, and then it's, well, I guess inner core, and then the tropical gets fueled by the tropical juice. The tropical juice helps fuel it. Any last questions, though? Any last questions? If not, I think we'll call it a stream, so I can answer, go through the Twitter sphere, and then once I go through the Twitter sphere, go to bed. I don't quite agree with that, but I think this was not the perfect forecast. But no more questions? All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for popping into this stream. We'll call it a night. Peace out.